Okay, let's start again. We may not have much time, but we got interrupted just before the punchline. So as you can see, the video is a little different because I'm inside the garage here. It's a nice garage. It's big. It's clean. This is a nice place. And I'm praying that the mechanic is talented and can figure it out, and they have the part that I need handy, any parts that I need. We were talking about the cause of mental illness, the big fraud in the mental health field. And of course I say the cause, and that's kind of clickbait, I have to admit. There are many causes, many causes, but I'm going to feature just one. And I want you to understand that this is serious stuff. And the medical industry as a whole refuses to look at certain things on us. They are ordered by the insurance companies and big pharma not to tell us the truth about a lot of things, and to keep us in the dark, and then not to tell us the real diagnoses, the real causes. That's why your doctor will always tell you they treat symptoms, because that's what they're required to do. That's what their license and their training does. We're going after symptoms. We're not going after causes. And as a result, they lie. They commit fraud. All of them. All of them. With Dr. Tennant and Dr. Starr, what the doctors told me was about a colleague of theirs, Dr. White, whom they knew. And Dr. White decided he was going to, Cheerios had manganese in it, with a little tilde sign, a little sideward scroll, meaning, who knows, And it was for the manganese on the side of the ingredients in the box. And all the other ingredients, they tell you how much of it is in there. But this is General Mills mainstream Cheerios. He sent the Cheerios off to a lab and had it tested. And in manganese toxicity, it was way up there. For example, 2 bowlfuls of Cheerios was a toxic load for an adult male, not just a baby. And what ends up happening is that the infant's liver is not developed enough to be able to process all of the manganese that it's being loaded with. And this is particularly true with male children. The liver is a little bit smaller, a little bit less developed than a female liver. The female liver can process the manganese better, but the loads and whatever the substances are, because there's several involved, many of which I don't know, the loads have increased. This is spiking. This is purposeful genocidal action. This is to well, it's in some ways worse than killing us. It's definitely hobbling us. It's incapacitating us. To give you an example, Dr. Tennant's example was a good one. He says it's like taking, back when we had CD players, you had a laser disc and you had a mechanism. And if you dropped any fine iron fillings in there, it would suffer misfires. And that's the way Tennant characterizes autism. He says it's like putting, sprinkling a little bit of powdered iron into a CD player. You have misfires. And he's quite right, because they are electric misfires that are occurring. And of course, we're told it's a chemical imbalance. Oh no, they're so related it's not funny. That's the part of the problem. Key feature. I went to a music therapy conference years ago. I studied everything I could in music. I had a really good literature review when I did my dissertation. That was the best part of it. And other students grabbed my literature review because I'd done so much work over so many years, And, as a musician and a psychologist, I covered things pretty well. So I went to Emory University's music therapist. I thought about becoming one, and they were nice to hang out with, and there was a lot of beautiful women there too. It was mostly women. And I went there, and the fellow had his videos, and he showed us his research on autism. And these were black and white videos. I think he was using 16 millimeter or 8 millimeter film. I don't remember which it was. I think it was 16 millimeter, so 16, I think that's what it was. Anyway, what he would do is he had autistic children, and he would present a stimulus. Usually it would be like a clapping of the hands on one side of the head. That's what they started with. And so they would take the child, filming the child, and they would have a loud noise on that side of the child's head. And then they kept recording to the point where the child oriented his head to the sound. And then they counted the number of frames that had passed. And they showed the same child having the same amount of delay to different stimuli. In other words, it was a misfiring in his brain. It was an electronic misfiring because of manganese poisoning. Manganese accumulates in the basal ganglia in the middle of the brain that helps to coordinate the hemispheres. And so we have a cause for autism. I won't call it the cause. There are several other causes, but according to Tennant and Starr, manganese was the cause of autism and bipolar disorders. Now, I already know that bipolar disorders and schizophrenia have a lot of overlapping features. And so what I'm getting at is that we are looking at being poisoned in many ways and many levels. And these interventions that can throw us off in our thinking are also frequency or electronic oriented. Time, space, all kinds of stuff can be used against us. We are quite vulnerable. And so when we have a warring culture and a warring population, the rest of us are going to suffer. So Dr. White wrote the FDA a letter asking the FDA, look, I've got manganese in there here. It says it on the box, and I've got this level in my lab, which is too high, which is dangerous. Why is it not revealed on the box? FDA guidelines require it to be revealed. And the FDA wrote back a letter for the first time in history and said it's not indicated because the manufacturer chose not to reveal it. Now, Cheerios is just one thing. And yeah, I know. I got it firsthand from that bullshit. That's just one thing that causes difficulties. All of the other heavy metals can be involved. And there are metals that you and I don't even know the names of. And they use that metallurgy and spike our food supply. They've been doing it since the industrial age. And even before then, there was a lot of spiking going on. So, the other metals are aluminum, cadmium, mercury. All of them can actually put a load on you. And the problem with metals is it's not just cumulative. In other words, you don't get two metals and you have twice the maladies, twice the damages. It's exponential. So you have two metals, it's 100 times the toxic load. You have three metals, that's 1,000 times the toxic load. And most of us are walking around with several different metals in us. The average person probably has 4 heavy metals in them. That's a toxic load of 10,000. So if you can get rid of the metal toxicity, you reduce the load on your nervous system, you're going to do better. I leave it to you to research how you're going to detox, how you're going to get rid of those metals. There's some nice little books on that, and there's actually some physicians starting to realize the necessity to do that, especially in the field of cardiology. They're just starting to find out about the load of metals and its impact upon cardiology, upon your heart. Also, at the same time as Cheerios was happening, they had cranked up the manganese in infant soy formula. Now, maybe the manganese occurred in the genetic modification of it. Maybe it occurred in the processing part. Don't know. Have no idea. We just know that most of that infant soy formula was sent over to Africa. It was probably donated by the American public, unbeknownst to them, poisoning children on the continent of Africa. And we have other agents that cause mental illness. One of those are parasites. And parasites are causing a lot of things. And one brain surgeon, one neurosurgeon was interviewed recently to say, gee, what was that? Blastoma, neuroblastoma or something. Boy, the imaging, the picture of that in the brain resembled the picture of parasites in the brain awfully closely. So you need to understand, they will not diagnose you for parasites. They won't tell you about parasites. They won't treat you for parasites. Why? Because it's against their training. Because it's a real cause of illness. It's not a symptom. So instead what they do is they look at the constellation of symptoms these parasites cause, and then they diagnose you. And then they give you a medicine to treat it, and it can be an exotic, expensive medication, even though something cheap would take the parasite out. It's a scam, it's a fraud. They make 2.5 times the amount of income as the next highest paid profession. Psychologists are nowhere near that territory, but we're still screw-ups. We support the system. They rely upon our backs, our labor, to bolster them up and lend credence, validity to their bullshit frauds. So we have parasites and worms, and in case you have animals, you know, well, we deworm the animals once a year. Or we used to deworm animals on a regular basis. Why are we not deworming human beings? It's very rare that a physician will actually admit that you have a parasite rather than something I don't dare mention because I might get a strike here. And the third method, so I've got heavy metals and I've got parasites, and the third one was revealed to me by a neurologist who's retiring this month, and I'm going to miss him. Okay, I'll be back.